my channel, and as you can see, we are in nature. It is loud today. It's like, I used to call them locusts, but now I know they're another name. I forgot the name of them, but they sound like locusts, but they're much louder. And I know like they come in fleets, some years it's more than others here in Texas. But anyway, I'm here and it is gorgeous out here. Sun is shining, but it's kind of hiding behind the trees and behind the clouds. And so it's supposed to be kind of a warm day, but it really it still feels good because the fact that the sun is hiding behind the clouds and the trees here where I'm at. Oh, there's a wasp. So we'll see if can stay in this area. We both can cohabit, or both can share this space without interrupting one another. Anyway, I wanted to, I don't know, I just wanted to conversate. This is another contemplation of the heart. I said I wanted to do these series because sometimes, I just want to talk. I just want to talk about it. And the topic today is basically suffering. And where does that come from? I mean, where does suffering, what is suffering? Is there a difference between suffering and pain? Basically, in my experience, there is definitely a difference between suffering and pain. Pain, pretty much, in my experience, it can be external, but suffering is internal. And in example, I would say, like, if I was to, stub my toe, then of course I'm going to have some pain from that. But will there be suffering? Will my mind be replaying that over and over, causing mental anguish? No, not after the pain is gone. Pretty much there will be no suffering. But suffering, on the other hand, that's more of an internal thing. And when you look at suffering, when you examine suffering needs fuel, right? You can't just suffer without there being a point of interest in order to suffer over or suffer about. A lot of people go through relationships that have been disconnected for whatever reasons, or they have happenings or events in their life that maybe was painful, and then it turned into suffering. And when you think about the question, why do we have to suffer, or do we have to suffer? That's the question. Do we have to suffer? And what does suffering say about, what does that tell me? Is that a signal that maybe my innermost being is trying to tell me or reach? Is there something, when I look at suffering, that has to do with the mind? And a lot of times we go through situations, and some people suffer more than others, and it just depends on the interest or the narrative that it calls from. I know a lot of people have traumatic events. Probably most people, if we're honest, we've all been through events in our life that we can consider traumatic. And the way that some of us get over it than others is how long we suffer, or if we allow ourselves to suffer. And so when it comes to suffering, in my experience, suffering is there for a reason. I believe that our innermost being, because sometimes there can be an imbalance in our just within, just the imbalance. A lot of times we're hit with so many externals, you know, and we don't ever have the time or take the time to be quiet or create a balance within ourselves. When things even in nature or anywhere, you can look at it from any standpoint: physical, um, internal, spiritual. You can look at even a vehicle. If there's not a balance in that vehicle, or our vehicle, which is our bodies, or in our spiritual lives, there's always going to be it creates an imbalance, you know, when we have too much of this and not enough of that. There's too much external noise, like when we spend too much time in chaos and not enough time in our peace. That can create an imbalance even within our bodies. If we don't give our bodies the amount of nutrition that it needs, the amount of water, the amount of things that make it tick correctly, then what we can create within ourselves, within our bodies, is an imbalance. And I believe that's what suffering is. I think sometimes when you suffer, mind you, when you lose a loved one, of course you're going to go through the natural state of sorrow. Whether or not that sorrow turns into suffering is another thing. I think that's when we allowed or held on or attached to something a little bit too long. And oftentimes when we're suffering, we don't even know why. Sometimes we could suffer over things that are just beyond us. I mean, there's just a perpetuating thought that goes on and on and on to me. And I say the thoughts are molesting you at that point when you can't let something go. That is creation of suffering. And so, what does that tell you? You know, and I had to examine that. And for me, it was an indication that that there was an imbalance within myself. And I think it is a good tool, the mind and the suffering, because you can either have a space within you that, or a mind within you that works with you, that is resting inside your heart, that is full of peace, full of love, or you can have this mind that perpetuates thoughts that constantly cause suffering, and that constantly brings up all of the bad that we experienced in our life, or the appearance of bad experiences, what we would consider bad experiences in our life, that keeps just bringing that up over and over and rehearsing that, hitting rewind, you know, and causing suffering. And so, like I said, I had to look at that within myself. And what I found within myself is that there was an imbalance. And when you see that imbalance, where your heart is trying to reach out to you, trying to get you, it's a tool really that I think that was given from my true being, or the Lord, or, you know, whatever your supreme realization for you, or what you call God, or, you know, gave us, in order to, if there ever comes a time where there is a imbalance within ourselves, it's like the Lord gives us these tools, gives us these things, such as suffering. It may look like, or what I call the intervals, you know, it may look like it's working against us. Sometimes your mind looks like it's working against you. But it's really a tool to actually bring us back into unity with our true nature. of where there is peace, where there is love, where there is happiness, gratitude, that peace that surpasses all understanding is my experience of it. And so when you see suffering, just remind yourself, what is it that I'm holding on to? The thing that causes suffering oftentimes is the attachment that we feel like we have to hold on to. The ego is good with that. I talked about the ego. And one of the biggest things that ego likes to do is control. Control will cause suffering. Attachments, identity is things that we are not, making ourselves into something that not. Some people really feel like that they, need to prove that they are something in this life. But my experience, to rid myself of this, or just, I guess, unveiling of this egoic nature, is really not to be anything, not to want to be anything. It's better to be nothing, and then all that supreme. When you look at the nature of this space, it's nothing, it's nothingness, but everything arises. There's nothing more powerful than the Almighty, than the Supreme, than the Source, as we would call it, God, And so my experience is not to try to be something. Anytime I've tried to be something, there was a nagging, there was a desire that came with that. And then usually when that desire is unmet, again, the nature of suffering, that suffering comes back to return, to help me, then give me a knock on the shoulder and say, hey, that's not your true nature. You are everything. If we are an expression of the Almighty, there is nothing that's lacking. So what is it that I need to desire for? And so that suffering that I had at that point was just a knocking, telling me to return back home, to where there's peace, there's love, to where everything arises. What's not here that's already in there in your innermost being, just waiting for you to unlock it. The way to do that pretty much is to listen to the suffering. Listen to those times where your mind is wanting to hit rewind and rehearse and all of that, and those moments where you think it's tragic. Learn from that. Look at it and see what it's actually trying to tell you. And after that, after you've seen what it's trying to tell you, let it go. I mean, what can you do at that point? At that point, it's just imagination, because you're really not there reliving it. It's just something that's happening here that's not real. It's taking time away from the moment, the now, the present. It's which time we should always be is here. That's the only place there is to be. Only the mind can travel. Now the mind can go to the future, the mind can go to the past, but your true nature is always present. And that's where you'll find the truth. That's where you'll find love. That's where you'll find this breath that the Almighty has placed within us. You'll find knowing, because He is knowing. It will unlock something so magnificent inside of you. Just if you listen to that suffering, but suffering is there for a reason. It's there to remind us that that's not what we are. We're not a sufferer. We're not here to suffer our experiences, but to have direct experience in the truth of who we are. And that is that breath of life, that expression of love, that wholeness of peace, that space where there is no boundaries, there is no limits, there is no identity to cling to in this space. So yeah, I just thought I would talk to you, and pretty much that was resonating with me. Suffering nature of suffering, and is there any use to suffering? What is the reason behind suffering? All those things came up when I contemplated the reason that I was going through a lot of suffering. And so, yeah. Anyway, I just want to take you with me. Like I said, this is a contemplation of the heart. If you've dealt with suffering and you had tools that you use in order to bring you back to this space of peace and love, what we should always be, because we are one in spirit. And so, yeah, just leave that in the comment section. I would love to hear from you. Remember to like, share, and subscribe. And remember that you are beautiful and I love you. Bye.